Is Natalie Musa, and I will be moderating today's presentation. Thank you all for joining our webinar today, in which you will learn how to achieve measurable benefits through project and organizational change. Just to go over a few housekeeping items, the webinar itself will last about 25 minutes, followed by a question and answer period. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the questions box. Now I'm going to introduce today's speaker, Kathleen Kraft, TACTER's Change Management and Solution Leader and Consultant. I hope you'll enjoy the webinar today, and now I will turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much, Natalie. I guess it's actually lunchtime where a lot of you are, so I want to thank you for joining me on for what for many of you is a very snowy day. So I do appreciate your time, and we're going to get started and actually see how fast we can go through our presentation, if I can figure out how to click it. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So real quickly, what we're going to try to do today is to give you a brief overview about, that balance of achieving objectives and benefits from projects. We're going to talk about helping to make those benefits more tangible and concrete. We want to talk about considering the impact of people-side benefits and talk about what role change management plays in helping to achieve benefits. And we want to make sure that we're providing some ideas at the end, to really start your own review and plan for gaining benefits. We're really talking today to project managers, change managers, and even sponsors, anybody essentially who has some responsibility for the bottom line. We created this topic because when we're working with our customers, we hear pretty often that change management is that soft stuff, sort of the intangible part. And yet when projects don't succeed or adoption doesn't happen, it's often the people that get blamed for not doing something or not being on board. So what we really wanted to do is to help to turn that conversation from what is the cost of change management to what value does change management provide, and I think maybe most importantly, what is the cost of not doing change management. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So apparently I'm not very good at this slide thing. Oh, there we go. Okay. So project management and value realization, we're going to talk for just a moment about sort of the business environment that's out there right now. Then we're going to talk about classifying benefits. What types of benefits are there? We're going to talk just a little bit about how we're measuring those benefits. What are some different ways that we can look to actually make them more tangible? And then we're going to start to talk about linking change management and benefits. And as I mentioned, we'll end up with how we get started, what you all can do. So listed a couple things about the business environment today. I doubt for any of you that this information is a surprise. It's tough out there, right? So most economic reports are showing organizations have to work even harder just to maintain their current market share. I read this morning on MSN that several classic retailers are in very serious trouble, in danger of possibly even having to close their doors. Places like Target, Macy's, which is sort of one of our venerable retailers, Best Buy, all of these companies are facing very, very serious challenges in just keeping their doors open and maintaining the share that they've already had. So given that this is our economic environment, what we see happening from an organizational standpoint is organizations even more closely focusing on what is the big picture and how are the projects and efforts and activities within our organization helping us to achieve that big picture, helping us to try to achieve our organizational goals. And to get there, as a piece of that, they're saying, what is our financial and budget responsibility? How are we managing our finances? How are we managing our investments to get the most for our money about that? Interestingly, what PMI has noted in one of their most recent reports, 70% of the respondents in their Pulse of the Profession stated that they are actually always or very often using change management and risk management not just as core competencies, but as activities within their project management methodology, and that they are in fact seeing that they're leading to a higher success rate. So interesting that as our environment becomes even more complex, at least project managers are saying that they're more often using some of these non-traditional things. So for purposes of today's discussion, you may hear us talk about benefits. So we're going to consider benefits, project objectives, value creation, all as one. In essence, really what we're talking to you about today is that the tangible result that an organization is looking for from a project or an effort. So since PMI is really the standard, again, we went to them to understand the role of benefits in project management as heard from their members. So there is a continued organizational focus, again, probably not surprising for most of you, on budget and financial investment and how these investments, most typically projects, help them achieve their vision or that big picture we talked about a minute ago. So it's interesting that it means they're not just looking at the cost, but really what are the true realization of the benefits. So organizations are pretty good project management machines typically. What we learned from PMI is that the typical Fortune 100 organization runs anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 projects per year. So lots of people busy, lots of things happening. At the end of the day, you're starting to see companies ask more often, what are they getting from all of these projects within there? So what is the value from that? As a side note, what we also learned as a part of this research was that managers are actually getting that message. So this isn't just a senior level discussion anymore, you know, how things kind of trickle down within the organization. Managers are getting the message, and they're actually saying that of all the topics that they're trying to learn more about and become more proficient at, value capture and benefits realization is their second highest topic on that list. So benefits. If we think about what kinds of benefits are available, they're typically classified into three types or categories. Generally, you're going to hear about straight financial benefits. And this is often in organizations an effort where they just want to reduce costs and overhead. In some cases, it's reducing in maintenance. Lots of times you'll see we want the company to maintain the software or sometimes facilities. Sometimes it's getting rid of those consultants, those people that have seemed to be there for a long time. So projects that have very specific financial benefits. Second is technical. So very often these projects are upgrading to newer versions of either software or hardware, trying to gain a greater functionality, or in some cases the opposite, just eliminate some bugs and fixes, try to have the latest version of something. And then you tend to have benefits that are process or operational, where you're simplifying or you're streamlining processes, where you may be trying to actually create ownership, set in place an asset management or a process ownership kind of situation. So again, this is typical, maybe a little different in your organization, but these are generally the types of categories that you'll hear about. So if we think those are the categories of benefits, how do we measure those benefits? Well, financial, probably the easiest, right? You have a contract today, you remove that contract, and that money comes out of your budget. You have a facility and you close that facility. In some cases, it's actually a positive improvement in their bond or financial rating. I was working with a major airline a few years ago, and we worked on a strategic plan and actually did an integration of the business and the technology, the IT department working together and creating a strategic plan. That strategic plan alone actually improved our bond rating. So interesting what happens when people start to work together and you see value from that. On lots of projects, you're gonna measure it by speed of adoption. So how fast people, how quickly they buy into the need for that change and actually start to participate in that new solution. Most of the time in a business case you're going to see this is typical for us to start on day one, and this is the kind of amount of people in the organization that we want to be able to use the new solution. Then there's utilization, and we tend to believe that employees are all just going to absolutely jump on board and be on board with the solution the day one. What I can tell you that we find often in the organizations we work with is that people can never be more creative than when they don't want to be a part of a new solution. Funny how someone can have a laptop that's not working, or be on vacation when you're trying to put an upgrade. So ultimate utilization is really that number count of how many employees are opting out or opting in of the solution. And then proficiency is the one we're probably most familiar with. So this is how well are people actually doing considering the new system or the new processes that they're having to use. So this is the time to the targeted effectiveness. It's how effective are people being able to do their job, and what challenges are they begin to see in that. I did some work with Accenture recently on a large project, and they actually talked to the customer right up front and said, you can expect to see a 40% reduction in your proficiency, and it could last as long as a year. So again, as change managers, as project managers, as sponsors trying to reach a value, that's something we need to include in our baseline and try to understand how can we close that gap, and what does that look like for our business. So if those are our benefits, those are the categories of benefits, and that's how we measure those benefits. And we've said benefits and value creation are so important. How many of us are actually achieving those? And again, we went to PMI for sort of our project management perspective on that. According to their Pulse of the Profession, 64% of the projects that the project managers they surveyed said their projects successfully met their original goals and intent. 64%, great number, right? The challenge is over 1/3 of the projects then actually did not. And if you take that 1/3 and you multiply that by the number that they were trying to achieve, there's a huge financial impact to organizations. From the flip side, what is working to help them achieve that? So we went to ProSci, who is very well known for doing a biannual benchmarking study. And according to the respondents within their benchmarking study, projects that had excellent change management effectiveness were 6 times more likely to achieve those project objectives, 96% versus 16%. So those numbers are very large, and if you take those numbers and you multiply them by the investment of the companies in people and in hardware and software, all of the components of project management, you can start to see all the money that is really being left on the table and relating back to our business environment. So I think the question that we wanted to try to approach then is, how do we as project management and change management professionals mitigate the risk of this benefit realization? I spent a lot of time in the South, so I have a way of inserting quotes from Southerners. So some of you may remember in one of the previous presidential campaigns where James Carville was famous for sort of saying, it's the people, or the budget is in his case. So I'd like to say it's the people. Really when what's the hidden success factor? As I mentioned at the beginning, when a project happens and adoption doesn't happen, we have a tendency to look at the people and say, why didn't the people do it? So really the piece behind that is, what amount of return on investment or benefits can change management drive? And a great way to think about it is, the greater the project's expected benefits are, depend on adoption and usage, or in other words, people doing something, people using a new system, adopting a new process, the greater that the people side benefit contribution is, and really, truly, the more potential value change management delivers. So we've got a couple little scenarios on here, but ultimately what we're trying to show is, when we're talking to our leaders, when we're taking business cases and applying those into projects, the ROI is really your expected project benefit, minus the project cost, and that includes change management. So when we often talk to people and they say, well, I don't have the money to do change management, you're really talking about, okay, if you need something to be adopted, and some of the components of that are how many of your employees are impacted, how many locations do you have, how much of their work is changing, what aspect of it, and what is the percentage of that work that is changing. How much of a disruption is it to their everyday life as well as to their customers' everyday life. And this sounds very simple. At the end of the day, though, if people don't do something, then your new systems and your processes are not going to work. Again, I just worked with a major water utility in the Northeast, and at the end of the day, what we found, pretty simple. It was an SAP system, and if a person in a truck doesn't turn on their computer and get their job order and work that order, then at the end of the day, you have customers calling in saying, wasn't served, I didn't get this work done. So really, this is talking about things like what are the number of jobs that we need to complete beforehand, and what are the number of jobs we need to complete afterwards. What is our ultimate adoption and usage that we're striving for? And again, that becomes a little bit of a number game. So if that's the benefits, the people, we're depending on the people for the benefits, how do we start to put these numbers together into a change management plan, into a project management plan, actually even into a business case so that we get the exposure from that leadership? So we want to start these conversations with things like what truly are the expected project benefits. And that's really quantifying those benefits in a very specific form. So if we have those amount of benefits, how many of them are truly linked to adoption and usage? How many of them are truly linked to someone opening a laptop in the truck, using a new system, actually inputting data into that new system, or using a different process, answering a different kind of call? What amounts and benefits are really linked to that? Third, what is the impact of process and employee activities? So a great many organizations you see actually are doing more process improvement efforts or business process management, considering business processes as assets. So when you go through that kind of detail, you learn very specifically what is the impact of the processes, what is the current state, what is the future state, what is the gap in between that, how do we bring people to that future state. Then there's how much disruption is there to the business and employees. Unfortunately, a very classic example is out there for a lot of us to look at. So when a new healthcare website rolled out, how much disruption were there to the insurance companies? Were they able to answer the questions? Were you able to access the website? So is day one a business as usual, or is day one a scrambling to try to make sure that your ongoing work still happens with that? What are the expected project benefits, if adoption and usage are zero? And again, remember we talked a little bit about risk management earlier in this conversation. Probably no one wants to put down on paper and say, what if the system doesn't work? What if we turn the switch and the system doesn't work? Or what if people are unable to successfully log on to the website? What is our backup plan? What really happens if adoption and usage is zero? Or what happens if adoption and usage is 50% or 25%? So actually laying out a risk scenario on how much ultimately value and benefits you're getting out of the conversation if not everyone gets on board 100% on day one, or whatever that magic date is. And then ultimately, when you've considered all those things, what is the cost of change management? So how much does it cost to have change management activities and efforts as a part of your project management? So considering that those are the questions we want to start asking, how do we get started? Really, this is starting at the top with our business case and the checklist to begin that change management and project management discussion. It's showing questions like we talked about on the previous page in that checklist to say, this isn't a soft benefit. This is not about, are people going to like it? But it's really about, are people going to do it? And what happens to the benefits that you're trying to achieve as an organization if employees do not adopt and use it. I really believe that among the keys to success are an integrated approach. And what I mean by an integrated approach is that there's not truly a separate change management effort, but there's a fully integrated project management effort that includes change management activities, it includes a change management plan, it includes a methodology and approach. It's very important. Our client delivery and approach always includes a change management component. We don't believe that projects are successful without that, and we do not believe that they are separate. In fact, we work very hard to make sure that our project managers and everyone on our team is very well educated in the importance of change management. It's a really great opportunity to take advantage of best practices. So I mentioned PMI a couple of times in this conversation. ProSci is well known as a global leader in change management education and research. And there's also a relatively new Association of Change Management practitioners, which is setting some standards and creating a certification process. So lots of places to go out there for that and get some information. And then again, I think sometimes it's really as simple as doing the math. So what is the cost, complete end-to-end cost of project management and implementation? And then compare that to the cost of not doing any change management and zero adoption. And you know, that's no longer a conversation in many of our companies that is a scare tactic. It's truly a risk management. In fact, I help to certify a lot of people in change management, and one of the conversations that I really try to have with them is, now for the first time you have tools to be able to show change risk management and compare that to traditional project risk management. So because I promised to do this in a quick lunchtime kind of approach today, I just wanted to kind of leave you with a lot of other resources that you can start to tap into. If you believe, like we do, that an integrated project and change management approach is critical to that, there's a lot of different places out there. I mentioned the ProSci three-phase process. It doesn't have to be ProSci. There are some other companies out there that are working to do the same thing. I think the critical part, whatever methodology you're using, you know, you have to make sure that that's a part of your project management, that's a part of your complete plan and schedule, and that you're using something to plan, to do some assessment, to plan, and then to evaluate and reinforce in it. I also wanted to just mention that there is a change CMROI tool that is being released later this year, and if you're familiar with any of the ProSci tools, it's a very cool Excel-based spreadsheet, which is very easy to use and allows you to input some of the data we talked about, right? So number of employees, number of locations, percentage of impact upon their processes, so that you literally can come out with scenarios about here's what it looks like with zero adoption, here's what it looks like with 50% adoption. So there's actually going to be a tool that's going to be available, and if you'd like some more information on that, please just send me an email and I'll make sure that you get with the people at ProSci about that. I'd also encourage you to make sure that you're educating your people within the organization. There are some certified workshops that we offer at Pactera as an authorized training provider for sponsors, for managers who play a very, very critical role in helping the people translate those big picture messages down to the what's in it me, even for employees, and then certified practitioners. So we get more and more calls about people wanting to become certified and learning what a methodology is and how to apply that. Same thing from a project management perspective. Again, you find ProSci and PMI working more and more closely together to make sure that there is a structured approach, and that approach includes change management, and utilize the business cases, help your sponsors and leaders in your organization understand really what the value is and what that value means in really dollars and cents. So what I'd like to do is stop and see if anyone has any questions. There are two success stories that will be included in this recording that is sent to you, where you can learn a little bit more about what we've done with several people. I mentioned a couple customers along the way throughout our presentation, but I'd like to stop and see, Natalie, if there are any questions.
Thanks, Kathy. Yes, we have a few questions on the line. I'll just run through them here. The first one says, most business cases are created and approved at a higher level than given to me. How can I get the senior leadership to think about more granular benefits?
So I think that's a great question, and frankly, most often, I hear that question pretty often. As a project manager and as a change manager, one of the things that we go through when we certify people is talking about the roles and responsibilities you have of helping your sponsors be more successful and educating them on, what truly is important from an achieving success standpoint. We and say that managers are the sponsor coach. So this is an excellent opportunity to take this to your sponsors and talk to them, again, about the dollars and cents. Here's the number of people that we have. Here's the impact of their process. Here's potentially the disruption to that. How can you, as a sponsor, help to make sure that there are appropriate leadership activities, that there are messages, that you're very active and visible, that this type of data is included in the business case and is discussed at the senior level as well as throughout the organization. So I'm saying that, understanding that sometimes people believe they don't have access. So if you don't believe that you have access, work with your project manager, who should always have access to a sponsor. If your project manager doesn't, find the best person. And I believe this tool will be really helpful, but honestly take that checklist and just have a conversation with them, in the interest of success. I like that, to find out what you believe is truly the impact and what that means and what adoption means to our organization.
Thanks, Kathy. Another question we have here on the line states, we are already doing training and communications. What other kinds of change management activities are important?
That's also a great question. There's several models of change there. The model that I talk to people the most often is the ADKAR model, which begins with people on an individual level gaining awareness of a change, then creating desire or making that sort of personal choice to participate. And then the third one in that model is knowledge. So while very, very often when we're working with customers on a change in the organization, the item on the checklist that people go to most often is training. It's very important that we consider change, again, from the process of where are people at today, what is our current state, what is the future state, what is the gap, what do they need to get from there to there. So very important training, but there's a lot of other things. Coaching, I mentioned a few minutes ago, when it's really coaching and working with your leadership, your sponsors, and helping them understand the roles of everyone in change, how people change, what are the kinds of messages they need, what kind of support do they need. It's critical to do assessments, so sending people to trainings before they really have an awareness of what the change is, what their expected behavior is, or if they've not made that sort of personal commitment to it, is oftentimes a waste and investment. You'll find that you often have to go back and retrain people if they don't have a good understanding of what's happening before they get into the training. Then there's leadership help on that, stakeholder management, lots of reinforcement and resistance management. So making sure that you understand, great, we've communicated well, we've trained people, we've set up opportunities for them to try to play in the new system, or do some pilots or some sandbox testing. But at the end of the day, how well is it working? Evaluate that. Put together activities that really reinforce the change, help to identify resistance and manage resistance. Because the great thing is resistance provides you a lot of data. It's not necessarily a bad word, as we sometimes find people believe.
Great. Thanks so much, Kathy. And with that, that will conclude our question and answer session. Thanks to everyone who participated in today's presentation. If you would like a copy of this webinar, we will be posting it to our Pactera US YouTube page later on today. And if you have any additional questions, all attendees will be receiving a follow-up email with with Kathy's contact information and a recording of this presentation. So thanks again for joining our webinar today.